Spectrum wants to hear your views. You can SMS at any time during the show. Type Spectrum, leave a space, type in your contribution and name, then send it to 7197. Your views, our interviews on Spectrum, Radio 1 FM 90.
A very warm welcome. This is Spectrum on Radio 1. My name is Edmond, Kizito, your host. On Spectrum tonight, unending challenges related to land management. How can Uganda deal with these challenges, but also ensure that land is productive for national development? Land remains the most critical factor of production in poor countries since it provides the avenue for people to invest and produce, especially where agriculture is the most important activity for them. In Uganda today, land is owned by only a few people, leaving many squatters living under the threat of eviction on a day-to-day basis, which again raises the specter of land conflicts almost anywhere you go in the country. In some instances, powerful people have grabbed land, while in other situations, valuable public land has been taken away controversially and given to foreign investors. Now, the growing population in this country is an indicator that maybe 10 years from today, more land for agriculture and settlement will be needed, both for urban planning and agricultural purposes to avoid hunger and extreme poverty as a result. Land management at a national level remains a challenge, given the fact that Uganda does not have a national land policy, which is essential in handling land matters. So tonight, we take a look at some of the emerging issues connected to land ownership, management at the national level, and the dangers that are associated with landlessness and the unending evictions and land conflicts. Our guest tonight, Mr. John Mwebe, Program Officer in charge of Land Use at the Uganda Land Alliance. You're most welcome, Mr. Mwebe.
Thank you.
We're also joined by Mr. Gwada Ogot. He's a consultant at the Uganda Land Alliance, among other things. You're most welcome, Mr. Ogot.
Good evening, listeners.
John, could you talk to us about the state of land ownership in this country today?
Thank you so much. First, I'm happy to be here on this program Spectrum at Radio 1. I work with Uganda Land Alliance, a non-government organization that fights for the land rights of the poor and vulnerable, and that seeks to see that the people can be able to have access rights, ownership rights, and be able to use the land to sustainably manage their livelihoods. Today we are running a campaign titled Your Land, Your Life. And it basically looks at the very many perspectives of land grabbing in Uganda, and that with the particular focus on the vice that has eaten up our society. The status of land holding in Uganda is to the effect that ownership and access are determined by very many factors, among which are the ability to access and use the land productively, but also the very grave, which to some people is of essence, the land becoming a commodity. Today we are looking at two dimensions where we are having land as a livelihood means and land as a commodity. Whichever side you look at it, there are people who are sternly using land, owning land, accessing land for these two vital uses. And one way or another, that one kind of use is affecting the other kind of use. So the state of land in Uganda is land as a livelihood means and land as a commodity. So this is where we are, and this forms the basis of our campaign that we are running as Food Rights Alliance with Uganda Land Alliance under this umbrella of Food Rights Alliance.
Gwada, does this kind of scenario favor production?
It does not, as it were. When you look at it from the perspective of land ownership, and when you also look at it from the perspective of land grabbing. Grabbing is not an orderly exercise. It in itself a very negative exercise. And the process of that disorderliness comes with social and economic costs to it, because it totally diffuses the element of planning. There are matters of bureaucracy, matters of ownership and control that are totally done away with when you talk about grabbing. But on a wider perspective, when you look at land, you must look at the core meaning of land within the African and global context for you to actually put things on the table and begin to discuss land. There is the issue of land and leadership, number one. For a long time, land has been, leadership has been associated with huge land owners. That exists. Most of the people who own huge tracts of land are considered also leaders in their own right, because they have little fiefdoms where they employ people, and they become what would be looked at as benevolent people in society. There's also the issue of land and the law, how land relates to the law, and if the law was based on the land. 3, there's also the issue of land and law, L-O-R-E, law, which is heritage, where other people, courtesy of mythical factors of contribution through family or other forms, have had to gained access over land, or more access to land over others within society. Somebody says that maybe I contributed to independence, I contributed to this, so I have more access and more right to access than you. Then there is also the issue of land and lineage. What you'd call the inheritance of land, which can come in through either chiefly positions, monarchical positions, or transfer of land from one hand to another, aristocratic positions. Then there is also the issue of land and life. Really, land is, when you look at it biblically, that is the core of life. So from the soil, I breathe life into you. Then there is also the issue of land and leisure. I mean, land is a multi understanding, and it is a core issue, but the land grab is even condemned in the Bible, in the book of Isaiah 5:8-10,
yes,
which says, "Who unto you who add house to a house, and piece of land to piece of land, to live alone and leaving nothing for the rest." Yeah. So that in itself is a condemned act. But to move it further, we may also need to look at what land means beyond those parameters that I have drawn for you. Land has always been associated with wealth. In a traditional context, where those who own land
are the richer,
and those who have no land are looked at as squatters, or are basically called poor. Really, even within us as we see today, if you have very little land, you're considered a poor man. Now, land has become an object of investment, but that investment is based on enormity, size, voluminous. Yet today the world is moving towards value-based wealth, not volume-based wealth, where the
quality, not quantity.
It's quality, not quantity anymore. But that also shows a deficiency. One, in terms of the eyes of the human being being bigger than his or her stomach, because you want to eat what your eyes can see and your stomach cannot handle. That is number one. Number two, there is also the element of saying that we have moved to value-based ownership rather than mass-based ownership in terms of how many cows I have or how much land I can accumulate at the expense of the others. We look at people who are today the world's wealthiest. It is not based on land anymore. Leadership is shifting away from land ownership completely. We look at even in places where we have constitutional monarchs like Britain, who are previously the main land owners, the aristocracy. They are no longer the wealthiest. We have footballers, we have computer wizards, we have people who are coming up with all manner of intellectual knowledge that are selling it in the market and accumulating more money.
Let's get it very clear here. Yes. In the past, you were wealthy if you had land.
Yes.
Right now, it's changing. You could be a footballer born in a poor village in West Africa.
Yes.
And you could be a rich man earning tens of thousands of pounds every week.
Yes. Currently, there's a young man at Makerere University who is selling software on the internet. He's probably one of the young budding people around. He has no land, but he has a brain. That's his investment.
But so when people grab land, they really think like the African chief, the man of yesterday.
It is a deficiency. It is actually moral decadence, because you want to eat much more than you can actually consume at the expense. Because a lot of the land that is normally grabbed, particularly by the wealthy, is used for speculative purposes, or at other times it is kept there lying idle for years. But on the alternate, when you find poor people who access land, theirs is normally a dire act of desperation. He has no roof over his head. He has no, things like toilet facilities become a luxury, therefore. You know, he has no fixed abode. And that brings in another element of land as settlement. And which I had written earlier. When somebody marries, or as you're trying to settle in life, the first thing you seek is a piece of land to put up your house. Two, even if you started working tomorrow, the next thing is, when can I put up my house so that I can escape the shackles of the landlord, of knocking on my door every 30 days? That is also a view of land as settlement. Two, we all know that the history of the world, the main architect of global history was waterways. All civilizations were transformed through the River Nile and the Pacific Ocean. There would have been no Mandela without the ocean that brought in the Boers. There could have been no Jomo Kenyatta without the ocean that brought in the British and Uganda and likewise.
Right.
But all these waterways were leading to one destination: land.
Yes.
Now, are we saying that we have failed to move up to the times to actually appreciate the full context of what land means to us, what it means to our people, and what it should ideally mean to leadership?
Right.
Because land, like you said, like my colleague Mwebe had said earlier, is now being looked at as a commodity.
Right.
But it is the only commodity that does not stimulate more production of its own. You cannot reproduce land. It is there. It is a constant. It cannot be multiplied.
Right.
Yes.
John, talk to us about the law. Does it favor the poor? The land law in Uganda, does it favor the poor?
My understanding of the land law in Uganda is that it looks at land as a means of production.
Yes.
When we look at a country like Uganda, where we are talking about it being a purely agrarian economy, where close to 80% of the people live off land, they farm the land, they survive on the land, even the activities they do are off land, then it basically means that the law as it stands today is in favor of the people being able to sustain their livelihood off the land. One thing that I'm sure of is when you look at the different tenure systems in Uganda, when you look at Milo, freehold, customary, and Milo, freehold, customary, and leasehold, you look at much emphasis being placed on the Milo land here in central Uganda, because this is where we have all these exchanges between the landowners and the tenants, the clashes that always come up because of the multiple layering of rights over these pieces of land. But if you intently look at our law, the Land Act, and the various provisions in there, they are there to defend the people.
The ordinary people.
The ordinary people.
The law defends the poor.
The law defends the poor. When you look at the land amendment,
the practice is different. The poor are being thrown off land. Then you have many places you go to in favor of animals, in favor of factories, large plantations. How do you reconcile those two positions?
And that's why the challenge is. That's why we are stimulating the debate on the issue of land grabbing. We are looking at provisions that, like the Land Amendment Act, which was passed in 2010, which has all these amendments to the sections, section 35, 33, and talking about how the people, the tenants on the land, can have their land protected, can have their rights protected on the land. We are looking at the National Land Policy, which is still in draft but yet to come out, and all its good provisions that it looks at how to protect the rights of the people. Now, the reason we are stimulating this debate is, with all these beautiful laws, we realize that the vice of land grabbing, the evictions, and all the uncouth practices that are meted out on the people that are using the land are still going on. And we are saying, where is the problem? The problem ceases being the insufficiency of the laws. The problem ceases being the inability of the people to stand up and talk about their right. Then the problem comes with the will to implement what the laws say.
Political leadership.
It could be.
Do you have the right mind in our politics, the country's politics, simply because we hear, fights over land in the city, in the countryside, everywhere you go? What is going to happen?
I wouldn't want to purely lean on the political leadership, but I want to look at the institutions mandated to manage land in Uganda. The institutions mandated to resolve.
The Uganda Land Commission, Joash Mayanja Kanje heads it. He is complaining that his land is being given away without him being told, and he's the custodian of this land on behalf of government. Other government institutions, ZUI and others, they grab it, and he's powerless.
When I look at the reason I would want to steer clear of politics is because in a political dispensation like we're in now, where you realize that many things may not be going right, you realize that if the institutions were strong enough, the politics wouldn't be the problem.
Yes.
So for me, when we are advocating as a civil society, we are advocating for strengthening of the institutions. All these institutions, right from the grassroots level, where we are talking about area land committees, where we are talking about the reinstating of the district land tribunals, where we are talking about all these other institutions, the land management institutions, the land commissions, to see that these institutions can always stand and have a say. We've seen all these acts of impunity, where even when the courts of law stand up and say, this is not right,
somebody comes with a deep voice and says, you don't know where I'm coming from.
Yeah, but we want to entrench in our society the discipline of following what the institutions have to do and have to follow through. That is the discipline we need to entrench in our society. And how do we do it? As a whole, as civil society, as government, as all these other institutions that we are having, we are saying, let us talk through the system. Let us talk about the strengthening of institutions, that with any political influence and anything, that peddling of politics, they can always find institutions that are standing hard, because politics will always be politics.
Well, you're talking like Obama. He stood in Ghana and said, Africa needs strong institutions, not strong men. Some people think we need some strong men. Take this continent to the middle income levels.
Yeah.
Gwada, talk to us about land. Do we have enough land? Can we have enough for everyone? Let's talk about Uganda, for instance.
We have enough land.
You sure about that?
Yes, there is enough to go for everyone, but I told you that the problem that we have faced is that of human weaknesses in terms of greed, and which normally derives from moral decadence.
Yes.
When somebody believes that it is in my right to fill my stomach at the expense of my brother,
at whatever cost.
At whatever cost, then that becomes an issue of moral decadence. The political aspect of it comes in when there is no punishment or there is no strict control over such acts or punishments which act as deterrents from these acts of greed. That is where the law comes in, because the citizens must also be given confidence that the law works, that there is a law in place, and to have confidence in that law, they must see action and not lip service. So that counts variously. Two, within the citizenry, there is one issue, or there's a philosophical manner with which you can look at land. The process of birth, when your umbilical cord is buried into the land, it gives you such a strong attachment to that land, and somebody says, I want to be buried where my umbilical cord was buried. Those are my roots. Likewise, there is also the aspect of wealth. When you look at gold, silver, minerals, all manner of minerals are only derived by mining it from the ground. Two, when you look at thirst is quenched by mining water from the ground. When you look at building resources and all the material wealth that we may have in our possession today, they all derive from the land. And likewise, even the process of death, when you die, it is soil to soil, ash to ash. So from a philosophical perspective, there is a very deep sense of meaning to land. But just like land is able to swallow everything that dies and also to sustain everything that lives, it means that therefore there is enough to go around for everyone. But more so, the issue of land grabbing shows at times, when I talk about the moral deficiency, is that you find that there are individuals or strands in peoples who appreciate or who tend to lean more towards material capital rather than social capital. People who have lost their sense of value and their sense of values within society. People who are able to say that I would like to live in a situation where I do not want my neighbor not to live. It's a matter of live and let live. That's what brings the value. Over the last 10 years, according to a research by the International Land Coalition, nearly 200 million hectares of land have been sold to big multinational companies and big businesses at the expense of local populations from 2000 and 2010 to date. Another aspect of land that I would like to look at is this of leasing, where African nations are leasing huge chunks of their land for nations, particularly in the Arab world, to grow foods, while many of their peoples go without food. And yet the capacity for that land to produce and for the people to produce remains untested, and it's there. That resource is never utilized. Now, half of the time, when you transfer land, particularly in terms of ownership, from one family, whether it is sold to another family, you're actually in a process of disenfranchising almost an entire lineage to come. If I sold my land in my village today to your family, I am actually saying that my children and my lineage has the potential of being landless, homeless, and therefore vagabonds and vagrants. While on the other hand, I have provided that sense of security to your children as people who are able to have a station, a fixed abode, which is enough to give them an anchor to proceed in life today and tomorrow.
Yes.
So the process here is that while we look at all these values and the way land has been lost cheaply variously, there is need to advise, particularly our rural populations, that one, if anybody wants to buy your land, focus on partnerships, not sale. Partnerships.
Okay, well,
that is key.
Listeners, this is Spectrum on Radio 1. We're going for a break. When we come back, we'll talk about the different land ownership schemes that we have in Uganda and whether they're compatible with development, especially the East African community and other problems internally here. We'll go for a break. We'll be back. Do stay tuned.
When Junior lost his appetite, his mother tried all methods to get him to eat. She tried scary stories.
Eat, Tommy, eat, or the big black elephant will come and eat all your food.
She tried magic.
Tommy, if you eat your food, I will turn this handkerchief into sweets. Look, bumble, bumble, boom, boom.
Then she discovered Apetol multivitamin syrup with lysine.
Mommy, I finished all the food. I am number 1.
Apetol multivitamin with lysine is helping mothers to turn mealtime frustration to a fun moment. Apetol has a great taste and contains lysine, which quickly improves your child's appetite and supports healthy growth. Apetol, help for life.
John, Mike and I, we go back a bit. We knew John at the beginning, working for someone else. But he was different. He had vision, saw opportunities. He started working towards his goal, opened his own garage, and worked, learning the hard way. His reputation spread. Trust, consistency, quality. Soon people were coming to him from all parts. He made himself and his whole street prosper, and also helped friends, seeing potential in people and helping them on. But John never shouts about all his success. He's just who he is. Special.
So here's to men like John, who make a difference, who enjoy Nile Special, the rich, satisfying taste from the source. Nile Special. You've earned it.
Not for sale to persons under 18.
Accept no substitutes.
Radio 1, FM 90.
Welcome back to Spectrum on Radio 1. Tonight, unending challenges related to land management. How can Uganda deal with these challenges but also ensure that land is productive for national development? Our guests tonight, Mr. John Mwebe, Program Officer, Land Use at the Uganda Land Alliance. That's a consortium of NGOs. And Mr. Gwada, Ogot, Consultant at the Uganda Land Alliance, among other things. You will be able to contribute to this discussion at some stage. John, talk to us about our tenure systems. Maybe before we talk about tenure systems, what is the common complaint by the poor in this country as you move around the country? What is the most common complaint that you come across?
The common complaint among the poor in our country varies in the different tenure systems that prevail in the areas where they stay. In central Uganda, where it's predominantly Milo, you realize that the tenants are suffering because they are always dispossessed by the landlords. When we go to the other areas that are having customary land, this is in areas like northern Uganda, northeastern Uganda, you realize that these areas have been affected by war, they've been affected by cattle rustling in Karamoja region, and many of these people have been reduced to IDPs in their own lands. They've been cramped up in given settlements, and they've left all the land bare. Now, upon return to their areas, they've always found these lands occupied, either occupied by the elite among them, who have been fast enough to know the value of land and go back and amass all the land, or by various institutions in the name of private investors, institutions in the name of various institutions. Right. So in the various areas, you look at the customary land, it's much about the areas that where the people had left and they find their land taken up. Here on Milo, you find that there's a lot of clashes between the landowners and the tenants.
Right.
And these are the major issues that we are finding. But maybe one other thing is the growing trend country over is the large-scale land acquisition for investment.
Yes.
That has not taken due. That it hasn't done the due in the course of the acquisition of the land, which due is looking at the land, acquiring the land, and if you need the people to leave the land, having them duly compensated, looking at the ongoing market rates, and having the people also start a livelihood elsewhere. Get them alternative land, resettle them, start for them a livelihood means, and the people can start off again, and the investment can go on. Now this is irrespective of the areas, is irrespective of which area in Uganda. But last is, you realize that the areas that have the minerals, the areas that have all these resources, by law, have to be held in trust by government.
Yes.
So it's not something that can be contested. That you say that no, it's not right.
It's under the law.
Why is government coming here?
It's no longer yours.
So
oil.
By any means, the people have to be compensated or resettled somewhere. Now Uganda has no resettlement. It has the resettlement policy is it's not that clear. The compensation policy is not something we have. So you realize that even that is a bit vague. When they say these people should be compensated, that's a bit vague to me, because it doesn't really stipulate how the compensation should all be done, but they say they should be duly compensated before acquisition. You find that even the context of duly compensated is also done treating on the side of the person who's meant to do the compensation, the entity meant to do the compensation. So these are the cross-cutting issues that are areas where there's investment, there's always the clash with the population. Areas where the government has found the minerals, compensating the people and resettling them is an issue. So these are the widespread issues, regardless of tenure.
And our land tenure systems, are they a problem? Are they good?
I think that brings to focus the greater issue of land policy and land laws. A lot of these things were formulated years back and may be subject to review, because land has been the cause of conflict in many of the countries, Uganda included. We have had conflict about land. There's been many attempts to try and alter the tenure system, holding systems. That has been done a lot until I think up to about 2 years ago, when the last attempt was made by Parliament. And this has been a...
We even got into problems sometime in 1978.
Yes.
Our beloved president at that time, he tried to get us a plot of land next to Kagera, and
yes,
we were attacked unfairly.
Yes. So all these issues, when you're talking about land policy and laws, you're also talking about issues that relate to human rights, because land has everything to do with work. Land has everything to do with the housing. Land has everything to do with quality, the quality of the citizens that you're bringing. If you bring in the large-scale, the so-called large-scale investor, you are actually on the flip side transforming a large chunk of that community into squatters or into layabouts. But if you invest in the people, you're actually creating a more well-groomed society that is able to take care of itself. 3, when you talk about land, is there issues that are women allowed to own land? You know, this tenure system that you speak about, is it exclusively a male domain, or does it extend to women? 3, and that deals with cultural issues. But the issues of land policy formulation and law are often embracive. However, we have noted a situation that where Parliament, in its wisdom, or parliamentarians have always taken this thing as an exclusive domain or the political class in trying to reform these laws. But there are times when you may need to have a national land convention where people would sit together, give their contributions towards the land policy formulation, and come up and say this is the best way we want ourselves to be governed. 2, there's also been a tendency for the political class to engage on other issues of direct political and economic interest, rather than on the wider policy issues of land formulation, because 1, they're either too sensitive, 2, because they may not know, or 3, because it is not a priority issue at that moment. All these issues need to be considered when trying to come up with a way that is surely proactive and able to project the nation towards the correct direction. Why is this even becoming more telling today? We are already seeing problems in relation to land and the resources in it. There's the oil issue in Uganda, and this spreads across the entire region. There is conflict in Sudan because of land and oil. In Kenya, there is oil and land also, and that is going to be it's already a cause for conflict. And all these events that are occurring, not only in Uganda but across the region, call for an immediate review of land policy and laws, particularly in terms of protecting those who may be seen to be voiceless, those who may be seen to be vulnerable, against those who may have access to power, and also who may therefore believe that they are insulated by the law from any form of prosecution or punitive action.
John, Uganda Land Alliance, those are the kind of people you try to protect, the voiceless, like they say.
Sure.
Talk to us about the East African community. In Tanzania, they have a different tenure system. In Kenya, they have a different one. In Uganda, have a different one. How does it fit in there?
Now that's one very interesting topic that has always come up in our different discussions. Just a month back, I was interacting with the Kenya, the Ministry of Lands in Kenya, and we had this extensive debate. And my question was like, we are getting into the East African Federation, the East African community, but we are talking about land in Kenya, where land part is owned by government, because now they've introduced the new tenure systems in Kenya. Yes. They are introducing communal land, which is now that belonged to the state, now it's coming down to the communities to manage. Yes. They're introducing community land, but then also the government still has a stronghold onto the land. And remember that 3 of your former presidents are the big landowners in the country.
In Kenya.
You come to Uganda, land belongs to the people. Yes. Tanzania, land belongs to the president.
Yes, not even the government.
The president. Now that's interesting.
Yes. Right.
Now we are looking at a diversity of tenure types in the region.
Yes. How do we harmonize that?
Is there even an attempt to even look at the tenure types? And this is the question that kept coming back in our discussions. We're getting into the federation. We are always told that a foreigner in Uganda can only acquire land on lease basis.
Yes.
Just the other day I was watching TV and the Chinese was fleeced of the land he had bought. And he was fighting with the community and telling the gentleman who had sold to him the land to give him back the money. And it rang a bell in my mind. It kept me thinking, should this Chinese be talking about land he bought from a gentleman in the community? And there are regulations on the way land should be acquired by a person who's not a Ugandan. So when we look at the East African Federation, and we are looking at the way we are crossing borders, Tanzania is closing in on the federation with regard to land issues because its worry is Kenya and Uganda, but more in Kenya because Kenyans are known to be aggressive. They can always get in and do anything. Uganda, we are all penning up. We are saying, oh, Hail Mary, everyone, come in, jump into the ferry. But where does it leave us? Today we are having people cross over to our country. We don't have IDs. Nothing puts me apart.
They gave out a few, I think 4,000. So we have some.
You need to be big to be having one. Anyhow, that's politics.
It's more expensive than a passport.
Sure.
Good.
Than even our lives. Anyhow, but we are looking at now people crossing the border, coming into our country, getting land in any way. Oblivious of the fact that if you're not a Ugandan, you can't acquire land in any other tenure type than lease. We are looking at all these people that have been brought in as refugees. We are a very hospitable country. I love that about our country. Yes. But these people are now transcending from what they were to owning land here and to starting a life here. And all these things are going on unchecked. What then will happen in the federation? While we are having, we are not at an equal level of economic, our economies are not at an equal level. Yes. There are those countries, Kenya is bigger, Tanzania is next. And you're realizing that our land is in the market. Yeah. Our land is a commodity. Yeah. It's in the market. That's the best way we can say it. It's in the land. Meaning these people can always cross over and acquire it in any way.
Yes.
Where does it leave Uganda? Where does it leave? Where is the federation going to leave our country? it's I'm not pessimistic.
All right,
but I'm not seeing so much
about those things. Gwada, I'd like you to talk to us about how do you think public land should be governed, but also I'd like you to talk to us about the East African community later, how you think this land issue should be resolved. But talk to us first of all about how should it be the Uganda Land Commission to hold it?
I think as part of the process of devolution from the center and institutional building, there needs to be an institution, the Uganda National Land Alliance, that should be empowered, strengthened.
What the Uganda Land Commission?
The Uganda Land Commission, that should be mandated and strengthened to be able to take over such processes, particularly over sensitive.
One office.
One institution,
right,
that should be mandated to deal with that. Just like elections are handled by electoral commission purely. Land, if you can have an electoral commission purely one single body mandated by parliament and the constitution to handle elections, then I think surely there is enough that you can do to strengthen the Uganda Land Commission to deal with these issues. Probably even if you look at the amount of investment that is put in the electoral commission,
yes,
as opposed to the investment that is put in the Uganda Land Commission, then you're able to tell the variance in terms of prioritization over these issues. Two, I think that one, I had proposed the issue particularly in terms of when you talked about the East African community, in terms of land sales or protection of land from the high rate of acquisition. The focus primarily is based on partnerships. You cannot be based on totally relinquishing your title deed to somebody.
Yes.
No, that really does not make sense anymore, because the moment you relinquish that title deed, you yourself have no holding, but the person is insulated, like I said. This, in view of the East African community, they need to harmonize all these things. Why? When you talk about Tanzania land belonging to the president, there was the precedence of Julius Nyerere having been president of Tanzania, and the moral character precedence that he set, the high levels to which he laid it, was enough to inspire public confidence in leaving that area untouched.
His own personal integrity.
His own personal integrity as an individual. For a very long time, he did not pilfer any state resources. He remains a respectable, and he also remains a pious, one of the most pious leaders ever to walk on God's earth, as far as we know. He's not only an icon within Africa, but at the world at large. Now, that personal character stood him out from the rest, and probably that in many ways may influence why people have not raised a din that the land may belong to the president, or the president becomes the protector over all the land constitutionally. That, for example, has been one of the major contests, say, in Kenya. The 2007 election war was not about anything else except really one of the major pretexts.
Maybe we should try the same here. Vest all the land in the president.
Well, again, that would have to be based on lots of considerations and comparisons between other models. Would you want to vest powers of the land in the president? Would you like to vest those powers in an institution like the Uganda Land Commission? Would you like to vest it in any the communal leaderships that exist? How that really would be up to a conference to discuss this issue. Like I said, people need to come together to share all these ideas and thrash out and come out with what they think is the best.
Like a national conference.
Like a national conference on land. That is essential. It must be done.
So we can decide whether to put vegetables.
Yes.
Like they do.
Yes, because if I again tell you that this is the way I look at it, and this is my proposal directly, then I am simply going or falling into the same trap that many politicians or political interests are falling into, of saying that we know it all at the expense of the people, which again would be highly unfair. But I think there is need to review all these land tenure systems from across the region, so that there is harmony as part of the process of regional cooperation, cohesion, and integration. That is necessary, right, so that at the end of it, at the end of that process, there is no single region feels that they are at the mercy or feel that we are likely to lose out in this, because that stops the whole federation, which is supposed to create a common market for all of us, and in fact to elevate us economically as a region.
All right,
that would be my conclusion.
Listeners, this is Spectrum. You can call in now. Our numbers 0414 348 111, 0312 260390, 0312 261390. When you call in, please tell us your name and where you're calling from, your views, your thoughts, and your opinions. Spectrum, hello. Yes, sir. Your name?
Yeah, I'm calling up.
Ahmed, yes. Spectrum, hello.
Good evening.
Good Your name is Paul, yes? Spectrum, hello. Good evening, your name?
I think the one question is the one question is
Spectrum, hello. All right, let's get back to the city of Gwada. Talk to us about these opinions. Sometimes the poor grab the land from the rich.
Like we said, a lot of the issues when you relate to land are based on moral deficiencies, which is human, and that is embracive across society. One, when we started, I had mentioned that we have a problem with land grabbing at the top level that is conducted by well-connected political individuals who are insulated from the law and who have access to this land. On the lower level, there are those who cannot access land through purchase, and therefore go and find any fallow piece of land, go and settle there, and after several years, when you attempt to move them out, they refuse to move out because they have developed an attachment, and also go really and probably may at one time or another report to other human rights institutions about being victimized over that land. That has happened variously. And that needs to be understood within the context within which it occurs. This is not an exclusively rich man grab land. There's also poor people who take land. That has occurred, and that in itself, whether
how widespread is it?
It is not really widespread at the lower level, but from both ends, these are criminal acts. When you dispossess people or you acquire land
which doesn't
belong to you, it is a criminal matter.
Whether poor
or rich, this is a criminal matter, and that and should be viewed within that context and punished within that context. Two, the issue of Ahmed talking about the value of land in Uganda. Land is really indeed very expensive in Uganda. But I also note that as we are moving towards value-based wealth rather than enormity-based wealth, I think that within the next couple of years as we move by, people are going to invest, because what we're looking at is movable wealth. I can move with my computer chip, I can move with my value item wherever I want to go. People are going to move towards movable wealth rather than physical land or stagnant wealth that really ties you down to a specific place. That is bound to happen. So that again, there's many forces, because there's reviews of value systems. People saying, so there's people who are suggesting that in the future, the value of wealth will not be pegged against gold, but will be pegged against equity.
Stock exchange.
Yes.
Was that a problem in the US?
Yes.
Derivatives stretching value beyond.
The university professor may not necessarily want to be paid a salary, but he may want equity in the students that he will raise, because he will raise the best. So these are things that are coming up, and they're all being toyed around with for the future. Then Asimwe brings in a very important aspect, the historical aspects of land. And this brings in the advent of colonialism, It also brings in the issue of lineages, which we have talked about in terms of land ownership and land access, the issue of law or heritage in terms of this access, who has more land than the other. Some communities have more land than the other, others have smaller pieces of land. Other communities have settled along riverways, others have settled along mountainways that are more agrarian. Really, it is such a complex and comprehensive vista when you look at it, that requires joint effort. It requires a more democratic way of resolving the issue, rather than coming up with one desktop solution that this is the
one size fits all.
No, it cannot fit all. It needs more discussion, and it needs an embracive approach to find tangible solutions to the land problem. But besides that, I think that this requires urgent action rather than future action. It requires urgent action, because where we are moving, where there's going to be massive resources and interest in Uganda, in the East African region, you're going to get more money flowing in the region, more people, more foreigners being able to purchase land, and with more foreigners being able to purchase land, you're going to get more people displaced from their land. That social problem that is pending is huge and requires immediate remedy.
John.
Paul talked about the fact that even the poor are grabbing land.
And you represent them.
And I represent the poor. My organization, Uganda Land Alliance, represents the poor. And we are saying, yes, this is very right. They pin it on the ignorance of the rights of the owners of the land. And we are telling them, this is wrong. You must know that if you're to settle somewhere, you must know, you must have a legal means of settling in this area. And they also fall in the ambit of land grabbers. The only issue is, for them it's easy to always get them off the land. Now, the issue always arises why we are talking about land grabbing, and many people put it against those the other people that have the money. It's because they have the money and they wield the power. So that's why now, when we are talking about all the acts and vices that come with the Land Grabbing Act, it comes back to them because they have the power. Ahmed talked about too much land in Tanzania. Tanzania, if we look back at the history of Tanzania, they were in that, it was a socialist state, the Ujama villages. These people have not moved away from that. And if you're to acquire land in Tanzania, you begin from the smallest structure at every village. It's the one that determines who owns or acquires land in a given area. Now, except for the confusion that we have here in our country, where anyone
talk about that confusion. Let's hear
where anyone can get to any place, acquire land in any way without even consulting the leaders in the place, and can also even stand against the leaders and tell them, I don't even know you. It's someone coming onto the land and telling the leaders that I do not know you. And when I was purchasing this land, I went through my lawyers. We are not saying it's wrong. It's right. You can go through your lawyers, buy the land. But then this is a person openly telling the leaders, you can't even say anything to me. I purchased this land. This is something different in Tanzania. They still treasure the institutions because they are firmly built to see that they can handle the land management. So it won't just be about us crossing over because there are large expanses, jumping into that, saying, hey, Berry, this is the best thing that happened to us. And then we till the land, and these people have put safeguards. So this is something we are looking at. Our safeguards are too feeble as opposed to safeguards in the other countries that are coming into the cooperation. When you look at Rwanda,
yes, small country,
but the large population, but the president is so keen on issues of land ownership. We are looking at his policy of land redistribution, where the big people are now having their land redistributed, and he's saying the people have to own the land. But this is to the Rwandese, or the Rwandans as they're now called.
Not foreigners.
They're either called Rwandese or Rwandans, but not foreigners. But they're so keen on who enters and who gets what. So in this cooperation, I honestly look at our country at a disadvantaged position. And surprising enough is when you talk to the people in this academia and the people in the investment circles in our country, they are saying, no, let the East African cooperation come on. We need the investment. This land can be put to better use. But when we are talking about putting land to better use, we are talking about land as a livelihood means. We are not talking about mushrooming businesses, malls mushrooming everywhere. Are people able to get into those malls and do something in those malls, is it translating to the ability to be able to earn like they were earning off land? We are not against investment, but we are saying how can the people be incorporated in these investments, and how can they be start clear of being fleeced?
All right, we have to go. Talk to us very briefly about that campaign in half a minute.
Uganda Land Alliance.
Yes.
Under Food Rights Alliance. I'm representing Uganda Land Alliance,
yes.
but we are under Food Rights Alliance, which is a loose coalition of over 50 NGOs
yes.
that are fighting for the right to food, the right to land.
Right.
We are running a campaign, the land grabbing campaign,
right.
and it's all about stimulating debate on the vice of land grabbing,
right.
and how we look at the different stakeholders, government, civil society, the private investors, real estate, how they can help and come and fight.
I have cut you short there. Thank you very much indeed for coming. Spectrum, Mr. John Mwebe, Program Officer Land Use at the Uganda Land Alliance. Thank you very much indeed for showing up tonight. Mr. Gwada, Ogot, Consultant at the Uganda Land Alliance. Thank you for tuning in. I've been your host, Edmond Kizito. Spectrum, we'll be back tomorrow. Up next is the news in English. Just stay tuned.
Let the sunlight in.
Good morning, sunshine of my life. You look happy today.
I am. I came in here and I saw there was a whole pile of washing to do.
But I thought you didn't like doing the washing.
No, I love it. Anything else you need washed?
Sunlight 2-in-1 with added fabric softener. Smells so good, you want to use it again and again.